Welcome back to the Blackhawks Conversation. Today we have a very special guest, the voice of the Rockford Ice Hogs, Dana Gray. The timestamps will be in the description below if you want to jump around from point to point in the conversation, but I highly recommend listening to the whole thing. If you're new here, I am here after every single Chicago Blackhawks game doing an in-depth post-game show. I'm also live right here on YouTube for every single game. I do a lot of interviews as well, like the one you're about to see. And if for even more Blackhawks coverage, go to blackhawksconversation.com. And without further ado, enjoy the interview. Well, Dana Gray, thank you for coming on. I appreciate it. Looking forward to talking with you. I'm sure the viewers are really going to enjoy it too.
Of course. Thanks for having me on, Ryan.
Of course. I wanted to start off by asking you a question about yourself, actually. I'm really curious to know when did you decide that you kind of wanted to pursue a career in broadcasting, and what were the first steps you took to get that ball rolling, get that started?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think that my answer is maybe a little bit of the cliche or that I've heard, but that, grew up just being a massive hockey fan and but playing not super well or athletically. And I grew up in Boston and, would listen to Bruins, Red Sox, Celtics, and Pats games all the time on radio, and kind of just fell in love with the broadcasting performance side of it. And I think something kind of clicked for me pretty early on. Like I might have been even in middle school that I just decided, oh, I want to be a hockey broadcaster when I grow up, because it felt like this perfect marriage of the performance side of things and then also staying involved in sports and hockey. So that kind of just got in my head, and then it never left. And I remember I emailed a bunch of broadcasters that I listened to growing up and basically just asked for any sort of advice. And a few folks told me about some actual broadcasting college programs, which I didn't even really realize probably at age 13 was a thing, and was lucky enough to get into one pretty close to home, and kind of just went from there. I called my first game, I think, when I was a freshman in college at Syracuse, and it was, I think, like a metal bat New York collegiate summer baseball league. And like, to me, it was like the biggest thing. It was like the World Series. And it's kind of just snowballed all from there over the last, 14 years or so. So it's been really fun, really cool.
So for that first game, were you kind of just thrown into the fire, or did you have any sort of practice leading up to that, or were you just learning on the fly as your first game was going?
Yeah, kind of. At school, it was my major was broadcast journalism, and there were some sports angles to it. We had a really awesome student-run radio station where, it was every single student was flipping roles. So some were doing play-by-play, color, producing, hosting, engineering the board, creating spots for the show themselves. So, but a lot of the classes and coursework that I did was very focused on news. A lot of my classmates wanted to go into local news or political reporting and that sort of stuff, which I realized pretty quickly early on in school was not going to be my jam, and which is fine. And so,
I think you
but there wasn't really
chose the right one.
thanks, man. I appreciate it. But there wasn't really a lot of, oh, this is how you do play by play, or this is how you call games, and these are good techniques for prep. So I think it was just a lot of learning on the fly and just reps and reps and reps and reps. And I remember the first game I ever did in that summer baseball league, something like it went to 12 innings, and it was like 12-12 or something. I was like, this is awesome. Every game's like so exciting. And then, of course, probably the next day was like a 10-1 clunker or something. But yeah, that's kind of where it all started. But hockey's always been my favorite sport. I'm obviously biased, as I'm sure you are too. But
Yeah.
nothing matches the pace and the intensity and unpredictability of calling a hockey game.
No.
So that's always been the goal.
I'm definitely biased in that way too. I actually just got into baseball last year because my girlfriend's
Oh,
a
nice.
huge Mariners fan, so she got me into it. And for
Good
the
year
first
to
time,
get
I'm
into
like,
the
okay,
Mariners.
right? Yeah, they went on this. I mean, sort of exceeded expectations with this run, and I kind of felt like a bit of a fake fan. I'm like, oh man, I'm getting on right when they're getting good.
Or flip side, they got good because you jumped on.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it. I like that.
Yeah,
I'm
let's
using
go with
that one
that.
for sure. Switching focus to the Ice Hogs here. They've had so much young talent come through recently, playing a really vital role, I would say, in the Blackhawks development process. I mean, seems like every exciting young player, aside from Bedard, that's on the Hawks, has spent some time in Rockford. Um, when it comes to Nightingale's approach, does he kind of focus more on the development side for the NHL club, or is he putting together lineups every night that he thinks give him the best chance to win, or is it maybe a mix of two, and do those two things ever clash for him?
I think it's a little bit of both, and I don't want to entirely speak for him, but I think more is the philosophy as a whole, and one of it comes down to just the proximity between the two clubs, right? Like Rockford is an hour 10 west, right down the road from Chicago, and I think that the Blackhawks have preached, especially as of late, though it's not a new phenomenon, that they want to use Rockford to its full extent, the American Hockey League to its full extent and what it can do. And I think you've heard Kyle Davidson say numerous times over the last few seasons that even just a few weeks ago with a guy like Kevin Korchinski, who's come back here to Rockford to spend some time kind of closing out the regular season, that playing in Rockford is not a demotion. It is not a negative. This is a tool that we hope that you can use to continue to elevate your pro game. And there's so much that goes into being a pro for these 19, 20, 21 year olds. For some of them, it's the first time that they're living on their own, learning to do laundry and cook healthy meals for themselves and those sorts of things. And that all goes into playing into a routine that I know that the coaching staff focuses on here in Rockford. So going back to the piece about Jared Nightingale, is he wants to win games, and he's said that from the jump. And while of course this is a development league, I would say the best way to develop is be on winning teams and experience success and be, participating in close one goal games, overtime, playoff runs, those sorts of things. That's what's going to be so valuable for these prospects, that when they're hopefully thrusted into the same situation up at the United Center, that's the goal. So there's
Right.
certainly, I can tell you, a ton of communication between the Hawks and the Ice Hogs on any given day. There's guys like Brian Campbell, or, last year Chris Kunitz was here a ton, guys that are just a part of this development staff that are working so closely with all these individual players and the team that it really feels like there's not much of a separation. The communication is constant. Obviously, players are being sent up and down all the time, but that's a really great piece of it too, because I feel like there's such a great cohesion between the players. All these guys have been coming up together. The Alex Vlasics, the Louis Crevier, the Del Mastros, the Korchinskis, just on the defensive side, they've all gotten to know each other so well. Drew Comesso, who we've seen a couple times up here in Chicago this season, he's so close with so many of the guys that have spent a lot of the season up in Chicago. So I really think it only benefits the long term growth of the organization as a whole, and just feel really lucky because I know that's not always the standard for NHL and AHL partnerships. Um,
Yeah.
without naming names, you don't really have to look too far across state lines or even out of state lines to see what sort of relationships can go the other way when it
Yeah.
comes to a prospect pool. So I think it's incredibly valuable, and can't say enough about the way that the two organizations communicate together.
It's interesting that you mentioned sort of the player relationships and them coming up together, because my next question was right along those lines of the Blackhawks and the whole organization very clearly value that sort of players building relationships and bonding and feeling like teammates before they even play together, and with the development camp being off ice and things like that. And
Yeah.
I was kind of going to ask you like what role Rockford plays in that, but I guess you kind of already gave me the answer to that one. So if maybe there's anything else that kind of comes to mind of how they
Yeah.
help with that?
I think the development camp point is such a good point, that when they decided to move that off the ice, like you saw it just this past summer with some of the new draft picks getting to know each other, getting to play together a little bit. And I can say out here in Rockford, a lot of the guys live together and they're spending all of their time together. And it's not just hockey, obviously. You're learning how to be a pro, and you bond and you get so close. And I will say, well, we certainly get treated unbelievably well here in Rockford, and I could speak to that just being a part of a few different pro teams before. But sometimes you're on a bus for 5 or 6 hours going to Iowa or Grand Rapids. It's not the private charter jet jumping over 5 states in an hour and a half. So it really does get to be that grind that guys get to bond and be a part of together. So I think that, I remember talking with Drew Commesso when he came back down after his first NHL win and the shutout against Nashville a couple of months back. And like he just talks about those guys here and in Chicago being his best friends, and it was so cool, that video that kind of blew up a bit when they gave him
Yeah.
the water bottle shower after that. He is so close with those guys already, even though he hasn't been on the roster for maybe more than 48 hours up there in that individual stint. So it's really important. And you look at these teams that have so much success, I think over the last decade or so in the NHL, the Tampas of the world that have gone on and won a couple of cups, that they are building a lot of times. And of course, there's pieces that come in and out, but it's these core groups that build up together and have that chemistry on and off the ice is just invaluable, in my opinion.
I agree, and I'm a big fan of how Kyle Davidson is trying to construct this team and the way he's trying to do it. And for that reason too, I feel like, I didn't play hockey at a very high level, but those relationships and feeling, like family with your teammates and feeling close. And I think that translates a lot onto the ice. So I love to hear
Totally.
that. And I'm a big fan of the way he's doing it, for sure.
Totally. Totally.
For the Blackhawks fans that maybe don't watch Rockford as closely as some of the others, who is maybe a player that isn't, one of the top prospect names like Korchinski or Alardis that those fans might not know too much about, but maybe has a shot at doing something in the NHL, coming up to the Blackhawks and maybe playing a role there?
Yeah, the two guys that come to my mind, and there's a really, really unfortunate caveat with this. We just announced earlier today a couple of injury updates to two young guys that were playing, in my opinion, their best pro hockey of their young career. I'll start with Gavin Hayes. He's a second year pro forward that really was starting to find his game through the meat of this season. And he's got double digit goals, and it's coming off a rookie year where he said himself wasn't, maybe his best. He got a 2 month injury in the middle stages of his rookie year, right when he was kind of starting to hit his groove, and it just threw things off a little bit. But I've been really impressed with Gavin over the last couple of months. He's got it elevated minutes and playing those top 6 minutes, and he's been finding the back of the net a lot more and converting on his opportunities and using his body a bit more. And I hope is someone that's a valuable forward or depth forward or whatever that role looks like at the NHL level. And unfortunately, he got an injury just last week and is going to miss at least the rest of the regular season. But if this is the end of his year, I hope it's something that he can look back on in a really positive way, because he certainly turned the dial up from year 1 to 2. And the other guy that comes to mind is on the defensive end, Taige Harding. He is the gentlest of giants. He's listed at 6'7", and there was a moment probably around maybe December or January where I forget exactly who he fought, but it was this moment that you could kind of just see it clicked. He had like a multi-point game and a big fight, and the confidence was just oozing out of him. You could just see it in live time. And since that point, he's become way more physical as far as using his big frame to defend, and also stepping up and making his presence known in the neutral zone, and even a little bit sometimes on the forecheck. And he's also dropped the mitts a lot more too, which I'm the biggest proponent in, or maybe I shouldn't say the biggest proponent. I will always say that fighting has a place in hockey. It's part of the game. There's certain things about it that, of course, you could go on and on about. But I even look at it with Taige, and I really think that has become a big positive part of his game that's translated into other markers too. He scored a couple of goals over the last 2 months, and he just seems like the confidence is growing and growing. And someone with his stature is always going to have a place in professional hockey. And this is just his rookie year. So, I talk about his development and the steps that he made mid-season. I'm super excited to see where that continues to go. And hopefully that, he gets back in pretty good short order. I think it's only going to be a couple of weeks of injury, but he's a guy that just seems to be developing his game at a really, really fast rate, and someone that I think Hawks fans should certainly keep eyes on and be excited about too. Those are fun players to watch.
Do you think the how much competition there is and how few spots and how many players there are on the Blackhawks in Rockford, not even in the organization yet. Do you think that fuels these guys at all to maybe, like you said, Gavin Hayes, who kind of had a comeback season this year and started to get going before the injury? Do you think that sort of competition for these spots plays a factor?
Certainly, yeah, and guys will talk about it too, and not in this negative, demeaning way that, oh, there's log jams. It builds these negative relationships. It's completely the other opposite. When most of the guys talk about it, I think of a couple conversations I've had with Korchinski and Del Mastro specifically, just talking about how much talent and youth there is at left defense position. Two lefty D guys, and they can play the other side, of course, but. They're also, the flip side of looking at that is that they're constantly going to be playing with incredibly talented, like-minded defensemen throughout, whether they're here in Rockford or in Chicago. So it's a phenomenal problem to have, if you could even call it a problem, to have so many great prospects that are quickly turning out of being prospects and just role players. But I think that competition is fantastic. And that's one of the biggest parts of the American Hockey League. It's a development league, but I would tell anyone who maybe hasn't come to a game or watched a lot of AHL hockey, the league's fantastic. Like, the quality of hockey is exceptional. It's the second best hockey league in the world, in my opinion, for a very good reason. And it's a really special league in the sense that you're getting this combination of really young budding talent that are maybe just finding their way as adults, and then guys in the middle stages of their career. I look at our captain Brett Seney has been so fantastic to the young guys, even just on this season. Guys like Lardis and Moore, who he was on a line with to start the year, both those guys have just praised what it's like to have a veteran and a leader that can also really, really play the game. And then you get more guys that are towards the twilight of their career that are just happy to be enjoying and playing hockey with guys that are motivated to grow their game. So it's a really cool hodgepodge of different guys at different careers, and it creates a really exciting league, I think.
Looking at it from the perspective of a guy like Brett Seney, you said kind of in the more middle portion of his career, and he's more of a veteran now. When you have guys like him on the team, but you also have all these young guys who are constantly coming and going, and they're getting the top line minutes, they're getting all the opportunity, and they're constantly kind of in and out of the lineup. What kind of effect does that have on a more veteran player like Brett Seney, when your top talent is constantly leaving and coming back and leaving and coming back, and they're kind of the priority when it comes to ice time?
Yeah, I can speak specifically on Brett. Like, he is a dynamite human being, and I think anyone that comes in on a veteran position to this league, they know what the goal is. They know that, of course, any organization is going to be maybe not prioritizing, but certainly keeping a close eye on the next wave of prospects. That's how it goes. And Brett, and I think of some other names like a Dominic Toninato. He's been up a couple of times in Chicago this year. He was a former captain with the Manitoba Moose, the Jets AHL club. Gavin Fitzgerald's a 9-year AHL left defenseman pro, and they're all fantastic guys, and they want to win, and that is their day one goal. And the goal quickly right below that is making sure that this next wave of youngsters gets to have the career and success that they have. It really is. I don't want it to sound too hunky-dory, but it really is what they preach, that, someone helped them when they were at the outset of their pro career, and they take it on themselves to make sure that they're doing the same for the next wave of prospects. So they play invaluable pieces I would say in Rockford and in Chicago too, because it all has an impact down the road.
Absolutely. I look at a guy like Nick Foligno as a perfect example of that for the
Exactly.
young guys
Yeah,
in Chicago.
totally.
A fun return for him the other night. That was a nice tribute they did, so that was good to see. He
That was
definitely
really
deserved
awesome,
it.
especially just with how, trade deadline stuff that all happens so quick. I'm sure he didn't get to maybe make as many goodbyes as he wanted to. That was cool when I saw that they were coming right back in on the schedule.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I wanted to ask you about arguably the biggest question mark in the organization right now is Kevin Korchinski. I've always been a big Kevin Korchinski fan since the day Kyle Davidson drafted him. But yeah, he's been obviously his development path hasn't gone how a lot of people pictured it and wanted it to go. And in the 2 seasons now that you've seen him down in Rockford, what has his growth looked like? Whether it's on the ice as a player, maybe off the ice, like you said, just maturing and growing up. And what have you seen out of him in terms of growth?
I'm with you. I'm a huge Kevin Korchinski fan. From just one, he's an awesome guy, and from secondly, the talent from a defenseman like that in this day and age is pretty exceptional. And I think that has been on display in different ways over his 3 years. I think the first thing that I think of with Kevin, and especially with a lot of the conversations that happen around him as a prospect, is that he has had such a unique 3 years as far as a pro. Obviously, with the eligibility rules, maybe that rookie year, and I can't be the one to say this, but I think it's fair to say he wouldn't have spent the entire season playing, National Hockey League games. And while you can, of course, make the argument that there was a lot of good that came from that, getting to have that experience, he was quickly thrown into the fieriest of fires as far as a kid
Yeah,
at that age. And he still is so young. When you look at the ages of some of these guys, the Levshinovs, the Korchinskis, the Del Mastros, just defensively, uh, they are still, learning so much and adding tools to their tool belt as a pro. I can say that I think Kevin's work ethic is phenomenal. He is getting here in Rockford big minutes. He's working power play. He's working PK. He's a horse when it comes to 5-on-5 time. And I think he's done a really good job this season, particularly of combining. He's a tough defenseman to try and put into a bucket, because I think it's easy to say that just with the amount of points that he racks up and he leads the team in power play points, that he's more of an offensive minded defenseman. But at times too, he can be really exceptional as far as making reads at his own zone, shutting down defensively. And I think that's the piece of his game that's grown the most this season. And that's what excites me the most about him as a prospect is there is a combination of that offensive and defensive side that, I think when you talk about it with a lot of folks can just seem like a simple thing. Oh, he contributes offensively and he's a good defenseman and that's what you want. But as far as actually having that impact on a night to night basis, you don't see that from a lot of NHL defensemen. They're really an elite few that I think you could make the argument really control both those sides of their game. So I'm really excited for what the future is for him, and I think there is a reason. And you saw with Kyle's words when you spoke on Kevin a few weeks ago. I think that's makes it as clear as day as where the organization views him and still holds him in an incredibly high light. And he's done everything that the org has asked of them. He's when he's up in Chicago, I thought that he played some really good games actually a few weeks ago up with the Hawks, even though maybe he didn't play 22 minutes. I thought all the plays he was asked to make, he made pretty cleanly. So I'm excited for him and what the future holds for him.
I agree. I thought he played really well, especially his last game up here before he got sent back down. I thought he played really well,
Yeah.
and honestly, I thought he was going to be up here for the rest of the year. That was my hope too. I would love to see him up here for the rest of the year and kind of give him more runway because since his rookie year, he hasn't had a stretch in the NHL of more than 9 games, which feels a little unfair. But I guess you look at just the amount of guys you have on the back end. I guess it makes sense. But yeah, I wanted to see him up here for the rest of the year.
Right. And I think a little bit to to the point of that too is you get into what's most valuable for a guy is playing 8 minutes of, maybe not high, um, importance minutes in an NHL game going to be the best for him right now? Or is it him logging north of 20 every night and playing every single special teams role? And I don't get me wrong, I totally understand what you're saying. On the flip side, I'm excited for a guy like Del Mastro, who I think has been, if not the best, one of the best Rockford defensemen this season. He just another guy that has really done a phenomenal job of honing all angles of his game. Like his rookie year, he was an all-star. He was putting up points left and right. Last year, it was locking in D zone, and this year it has been that meshing of the two pieces. So I'm excited that he's up there and getting a look for sure.
Yeah, I've been really impressed by Del Mastro, and you kind of always know his or always have known of his, what he is in the defensive zone and how effective he is there, and he brings that physicality. But what I've noticed in the last two games specifically, it was the Vegas game and then the Minnesota game the other night. He was very offensively involved, offensively minded, looking to join the rush, wanting the puck in the offensive zone. So, I mean, if he can unlock that level to his game, I think he's going to be a really important piece to this Blackhawks team going forward. And I think he already is. He already has the makings of it. Just what he can do in the defensive zone and especially with that physicality that I think they lack right now.
Totally. I mean, how valuable is it in this day of the NHL to have a defenseman that can take a puck from goal line to goal line? Like that's not a small thing. And I would say both Korchinski and Del Mastro, at least from what I've seen with my own eyes, I'll do that at least a couple times a game and usually even hang on to it a little bit more in the O zone.
Yeah. Whenever I watch the Rockford highlights, it's at least once a game. There's a Korchinski goal line to at least blue line rush at least, and so yeah, he's a gazelle on the skates. He's such a good skater. He's so good with the puck. Really,
that's
it
kind of
sounds like an insult, but it's not meant to be.
No,
it's a compliment. One more question about Korchinski.
Yeah,
obviously it's been a struggle for him. I think not maybe being where he wants to be, and he's kind of being lapped by guys that were drafted after him, and obviously struggling to hold a spot in the NHL. How much do you think that has affected him, and how has he responded to that and maybe used that as fuel? I hope used it as fuel.
Yeah, I can't, totally, I guess, kind of speak for him in the sense I've never really looked at it as being lapped in that sense, and that's not me, knocking you for that. I mean, I've heard it around too. I think he's just such a unique type of defenseman, and the Blackhawks are in such a unique position. And when it comes to their defense, like what are they looking to do right now this season? And that is to be winning games. That's why you're seeing a guy like Matt Grzelcyk, who's almost a 10-year pro and wasn't on this team 2 weeks before the season started. He's been phenomenal. And there's a reason that he's getting minutes. There needs to be this balance, even at the NHL level, in my opinion, of can't just throw a bunch of 20-year-olds in there and go, all right, we'll figure it out, see what happens. And like we were just talking about, that there is a little bit of a numbers game with that. What I will say is, kind of going back to what we were talking about earlier with the communication, it is so strong as far as between Rockford and Chicago. Like Kevin is getting great feedback, talking with the Hawks, the development coaches, all of that stuff, as are all the other prospects, on a weekly, if not daily basis. So I think that message is always going through their heads of positivity and what the future holds for them. And I really don't, I've at least never experienced any sort of negative competitiveness. It's a good problem to have as far as an organization to have so many talented guys. And it's unique in the sense too that, the Hawks had a ton of draft picks and still have a ton of draft picks, and you got to use them. And well, I guess you don't have to use them, but certainly over the last few years, it's made sense to take the best available and build out that core. So with a guy like Korchinski, I certainly, and just getting to know him too, and his work ethic and the way that he shows up to the rink every day, smiling, great, happy guy. I don't sense that at all from him, and it certainly hasn't taken a toll on his play. He's been pretty locked in, I think, no matter what level he is, and especially here in Rockford.
Absolutely. One final question I have for you here. I want to get your thoughts on the newly signed Sacha Boisvert. Obviously, he's gonna get his stint in the NHL here to end the season, but I think a lot of people anticipate, he's not fully NHL ready yet, and is probably gonna need some time in Rockford. So, what are you looking forward to most about his game and what he's going to bring to the organization?
Yeah, I mean, just like a dynamic player, right? I know there's been a little bit of discourse about his season at BU and especially the way it ended, but I think the great part now is that we can just put that aside, right? Like this is the new chapter of him as a pro, and if he comes out and starts contributing whenever that is, if that's in Chicago or in Rockford, that's all that matters. So I'm excited, even just watching highlights of him this year and going back earlier on into his days, especially kind of after the Hawks drafted him. He's such a great skater, and I think here in Rockford, a lot of the attention the last couple of seasons, other than maybe the Nazar, the Moore, the Lardis, has been a big focus on the defense, and rightfully so, just the way that the roster has constructed. But I'm just so excited to see another high flying offensive prospect in the organization and getting to prove themselves. You've seen it with guys like Nazar last year. He came in for 20 games, just lit up this league. I remember there was a moment, I think we were in Lehigh Valley playing the Phantoms, which is the Flyers affiliate. It was like a 7-2 win. And at some point when it was 6-2 in the second period, Nazar just he sniped this shot from like the goal line, maybe even below the goal line over the goalie's shoulder. And it was like this moment of like, okay, this league is no longer, needed
Yeah.
for him. And like you saw the moments of that with Oliver Moore at the start of the year. And if that's the case for, Boisvert, where he starts the season, next year in Rockford or is spending time here, that's always going to be the game plan. And I would think it's awesome for players in that position too, that you can just look at two very recent examples of that in Nazar and Moore and even Lardis, that if you can play at this league and build your game from all different facets and turn into dominating this league, we're going to reward you. That's the goal of it all. So I'm fired up. I've heard nothing but good things about him as far as a person. Excited to meet him whenever that is. And yeah, just excited for him that he gets to kind of turn the page and turn into this chapter of being a pro, because that's obviously the goal.
Yeah, I'm stoked. I've been refreshing my Twitter constantly, waiting for that Ben Pope tweet. The visa is cleared.
The
He's
visa.
gonna play. Waiting for that tweet. So hopefully he plays tomorrow, maybe tonight. I hope it's soon. That'd be awesome.
I guarantee you are not the lone Ben Pope Twitter
Yeah.
notification follower there.
At one point, I had his notifications on, and then I was like, "This guy tweets a lot. I gotta
Yeah.
turn the notifications off."
Guy went to Japan over the summer. We're like, okay, we gotta.
Yeah. Well, that's all my questions I have for you. Thank you so much again for coming on, Dana. I really appreciate it, and I know the viewers are really going to enjoy this one.
Oh, of course, anytime, Ryan. Good to meet you and catch up, and happy to jump on whenever.
Thank you.